Good afternoon, everyone, and really a very warm welcome to the 2023 Danube Water Conference. It's so nice looking around and seeing so many familiar faces. Hello, Kathi.
Yes.
It's really great. My name is Raimund Meyer. I'm Senior Water Resources Management Specialist, and I'm the team leader of the Danube Water Program. And it's my pleasure to introduce today and to welcome you for the 2023 Danube Water Conference, together with Kathi Schilling, who is standing here on my right.
I mean, I know it looks like sitting, but beside me.
Apologies. And Kathi Schilling is the head of the IWD Secretariat, which is our partner organization, the World Bank partner organization, the International Association of Water Service Companies in the Danube River catchment area, an organization with which we implement the Danube Water Program already since 10 years. It's the first time since 2019, I think, that we are back in Vienna, meeting like in person, because the last Danube Water Conference in person was organized 2019, exactly in this room. In the meantime, a certain pandemic hit the world and everything was moved online. But now it's really great to be back with an in-person and physical event again. And we're really excited to see so many of you, and we hope that we really have put together an exciting program for the next 3 days. We look forward really to active discussions, to really a knowledge exchange that you can connect with colleagues, you can make new friends, you can gain a lot of knowledge, you can share knowledge also you bring with you, because that's the purpose also for the event which we organized here today. The title of this year's event is Navigating Changing Waters, New Ways to Overcome Emerging Challenges of the Water Sector in the Danube region. We have chosen this title because from the discussions with many sector representatives, with you also, with many of you over the past period, we recognize that there are multiple challenges which hits the region, not only the Danube region, but also beyond the Danube region, including a number of different aspects. On one hand, it's the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic and the related economic crisis and the high inflation rate. Furthermore, we have an invasion also in Ukraine, which causes also human casualties, and it's a huge crisis, obviously. We have very high energy prices causing also challenges for operation and maintenance for many of the utilities, water service providers in the region. And also we are confronted with like more human aspects, also organizational aspects, with an aging workforce in the Danube region, which is causing also organizational challenges for the water sector and for the water supply utilities and wastewater utilities in the Danube region, apart from climate change, which is increasingly visible also in the region.
Easy job.
These are just some of the issues which we would like to address with you in the frame of the Danube Water Conference. And we would also like to share with you some creative ideas how to overcome these different challenges. We have overall more than 180 registered participants. I think it's the biggest Danube Water Conference ever organized, if I'm not mistaken. And we have plenty of representatives from utilities, from local and national governments, from regulatory agencies, from international organizations, from private companies, academia, professional associations from more than 22 countries, I think. So we have really significant knowledge concentrated really in this room. And we want to make use of this knowledge with your active participation and with a lot of presentations also, which will be provided in the frame of the conference over the next 3 days. But before going into more detail, we would like to thank already our institutional partners. On one hand, the Austrian Ministry of Finance for the long-term support of the Danube Water Program. I mentioned already, it's already the 10th year. And last year in 2022, the new 4th phase was launched, allowing to continue with Danube Water Program activities until the end of 2025. So a big applause, I think, for the Austrian Ministry of Finance. And furthermore, also more recently, additional institutional partner came on board, which is the Austrian Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Regions and Water Management. So that's the ministry with the short name. And this is like a more recent support, because at the UN Water Conference in New York, we organized a side event sharing experiences gained in the frame of the Danube Water Program, and the Austrian Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Regions and Water Management agreed to support the Danube Water Program also in the long term. So that's an additional institutional partner we have on board, and also an applause, I think, for this additional support. But that's not all of it. I think the additional partners, and I think Katja want to move on.
Yes. Thank you so much, Raymond. I have to move that down. I mean, I even thought about putting on my high heels for you, but I decided no, I'll stay comfortable. So I have to move the mic down. Yes, we at IWD, we're really excited about this week. We call it informally the Danube Water Week already, because we have this conference back to back with the Danube Hub UBP workshop. We are here not only celebrating the first in-person Danube Water Conference after 4 years of break, as you said. We are also celebrating 10 years of Danube Water Program, and we're celebrating 30 years of IWD. And there will be quite a big celebration tomorrow. So you have already mentioned our institutional partners, but there are more partners here. And I would like to mention, they are there, yeah, our conference supporters, among them members, IWD dear members, ESCAN, and also Hydrophil, but also other partners like GFA, or from the World Bank, the new IBNet team, with whom we have a letter of intent to support their activities in the Danube region. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your support. And please feel free to visit them during the breaks in the catering area, and reach out also during the welcome reception and the conference dinner tomorrow. In addition, a very big special thank you goes to Vienna Water, who is supporting the conference dinner tomorrow. So maybe we provide a round of applause to all of them. But I mean, there's one more very important component to a conference, and that's you, the participants. Because what would we do here without you sitting down and listening? You have to listen, unfortunately, to us. So here we just wanted to provide a little bit of an insight into the distribution of our participants. As you can see on the slides, a majority comes from utilities and utility associations, so over 50%. But we also have quite a nice representation from regulators, corporate partners, donors, and IFI. And I'm extremely happy that we have quite a nice share of young water professionals here. They're very close to my heart. They know it because I'm coming basically from there. So great to have you. And you will see them all around. You've seen them already at the registration. You will see them co-moderating, etc. They're here to learn, to listen, but also to share their perspective with you. So please listen to them, and they have important things to share. In addition, we are providing an overview of the countries where our visitors are coming from. You can see naturally the majority comes from Austria, but in addition, we have Albania and Kosovo quite nicely represented. And I'm not sure what you think, Raymond, but obviously the Danube Water Forum was a good idea. So to have it there in the region, and let's see which country will be there in 2 years, because we have not yet decided where to do the Danube Water Forum next year. In addition, we also have a nice representation of other countries from the region. In total, 23. So even beyond the region, as you can imagine. And with that, over to you.
Thanks, Katja. Take the microphone again. So I think we have really an interesting agenda ahead of us. Today, after the intro and welcomes, we will have a very interesting keynote speech with the title, How to Address the Sector's Challenges in a Time of Multiple Crises. I will separately introduce this then later on. And tomorrow we will have, today for the technical sessions, we will have a number of technical sessions tomorrow starting in the morning. So the whole day there will be a lot of very interesting knowledge shared. There will be the possibility to ask questions, to engage in discussions. And in order to gain also from the experience from all colleagues and representatives involved in the Danube Water Conference, we will have roundtable discussions tomorrow in the evening then, where we would like to discuss with you also approaches on how to overcome these different challenges, which will be addressed more in detail tomorrow. Then on Friday in the morning, we will have a poster breakfast, which will be out there. So you're all welcome to come, grab a coffee, have a discussions with the presenters, meet with colleagues, and continue also with the networking and exchanging experiences and ideas and making new friends. And then we will have a specific session on the importance of communication. I think it's very important to have such a session as well, because there can be brilliant ideas, but if we do not communicate them to the world outside of the water box, then we don't have the impact which we could have otherwise. So please also come for this very interesting session. And then by around Friday lunchtime, we will close with a wrap-up, a brief wrap-up and closing words around Friday lunchtime. This will happen. So very interesting agenda ahead of us. But that's not all. We also have a number of social events coming up. Today, after the opening session, we will have already the welcome reception at 6 p.m. in the conference venue, so just outside here. So you can use the opportunity to connect with colleagues and to have first exchange already. And then tomorrow evening, we will have a conference dinner at 7 p.m., which will be on a ship on the MS Vindobona. So you're all kindly asked, for those who participate, to come on time at 7 p.m. To Schwedenplatz. You will find the details on the venue and where to go in the conference brochure. And we will have a very nice evening dinner there. And there are rumors around that there will also be a birthday cake. So that's maybe an additional incentive for you to come really tomorrow in the evening as well. So don't miss this opportunity. More details in the brochure, and handing back to you, Kathy.
Thank you. Yeah, you already pushed the button. Thanks. So if you tell yourself, okay, I have no idea how I should remember all of that information, or maybe you will have 1 or 2 drinks too much at the welcome reception, you can find all of that also in the conference brochure, page 32. Or you just simply reach out to our team here walking around. Just one more important information, the group photo will be taken tomorrow before lunch. So make sure to be there, to be here so that you can prove you have been at the conference, okay? In addition, we were talking about communication. So we would like you to follow us. The hashtag of the conference is DWC 2023 DWC. We have channels on LinkedIn and on Twitter, so make sure to follow. And I mean, very close to my heart, please do me a favor. We have birthdays or celebrations going on here. I would like to reach the 1,000 followers on our LinkedIn page. So if we reach that in the course of the conference, I will be the most happy person here. So you can help me to reach that. In addition, all materials, the presentations, also the report and session summaries of the conference will be made available on our dedicated events page. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Katja. And I think we talked already too much. I think it's time to invite supporters for some welcome notes. And first, we would like to invite Ms. Verena Hack with some brief welcome words on behalf of the Austrian Ministry of Finance. Verena Hack is the Deputy Director for International Financial Institutions in the Austrian Federal Ministry of Finance, where she oversees several trust funds and acts as the main desk officer in relation to the Asian Development Bank and as Deputy to the Asian Development Fund. Ms. Hack has extensive experience working with international financing institutions, but also with working with the European Union. Verena, please come to the podium and provide us some welcome words. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And really, it's a great pleasure to be here today in person after 4 years and to see so many of you coming to Vienna. And as kind of deputy director for the responsible unit in the Ministry of Finance, it's really a great pleasure to welcome you all. And really a special thank because without Raimund, Kati, but as well Walter Kling and all her team, we could support the Danube Water Program, but we could not kind of host such events which I think are really important to keep the communication, as Raimund and Kati before that mentioned, up, and to exchange new ideas to exchange kind of different approaches and to network and to learn from each other. As already said, it's quite a special occasion. We will celebrate the 10 years anniversary of this program and the 30th year anniversary of IAWD. And already now, I mean, I'm very bad in singing, okay? But happy birthday to you all. Water has been an important strategic priority for Austria's cooperation, and this shows as well that another ministry has joined the cooperation. And I think the Danube Water Program has been one of the longest standing programmatic cooperations the Ministry of Finance has with the World Bank. And I think it cannot be stressed enough that a lot has already been achieved since the launch of this program, ranging from the comprehensive assessment of the state of water sector, policy support to the countries in the Danube Basin, and of course, many successful capacity development programs under DLEAP. And here again, let me all thank you very much to the program team for their excellent work and their achievements. And really, again, thank you and an applause for you. I mean, Raimund and Kati already kind of mentioned it. It has been quite some interesting in inserted commas 4 years. And I mean, the times now, I think that the program or the motto of the conference could not fit better in navigating in changing waters with the kind of multiple challenges which we all face, ranging from the war in Ukraine and with high inflation, high energy prices, disrupted supply chains, and with, unfortunately, a new normal. So last but not least, what I kind of would like to mention as well, and which is very important for us as well, is the impacts of climate change, which I think are very important and can be felt even more in the Danube region. And I think that it will be very interesting to exchange ideas on that and how we can take and tackle kind of multiple challenges like heavy rain and floodings, but as well drought in the same time. So I won't drag kind of keep you longer from the key speech from Ramon, and I hope that you will have a very interesting exchange of view, and that the Danube Water Conference continues to be a flagship conference and flagship event of this program, and we are very happy to support the program and this conference. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Verena, for your kind words. Really appreciate it. With this, we would like to move on to our next speaker, providing welcome words on behalf of the World Bank. This will be my colleague, Ramon Munoz-Raskin, providing some brief welcome words. Ramon is the program leader for infrastructure and sustainable development, including water, for the Western Balkans regions within the World Bank. And when we prepared for this conference, he told me that water is actually the most important part of the work he is doing. Correct? Ramon is already since more than 20 years involved in operation and policy experience in infrastructure and sustainable development at the World Bank, and he also worked in Latin America, Africa, next to Europe and Central Asia. So also a broad global expertise which Ramon can bring in. So handing over to you, Ramon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raymond, and thank you, Kati, for organizing, and to all the organizing committee. I'm new to water. Okay, so I've only been working with water for a year, but working extensively with the World Bank. I want to welcome you to this beautiful city of Vienna. I think that the Ministry of Finance didn't want to highlight, but we have a fantastic weather coming for you. And also welcome to the Danube Water Conference. So I'm honored to be here on behalf of the World Bank, and from our institution, we remain committed to the agenda of sustainable development, poverty reduction, and particularly with the water agenda. I would like to express gratitude for all the supporters of the Danube Water Program and to all the organizers of the conference that have brought people from not only from the Danube, but also beyond. As Verena was mentioning, the name of the conference comes very timely. There are multiple concurrent crises. I don't need to go into that, but I just want to say that yesterday I was in Bosnia and I was rafting, right? And it had the locals were telling me how they have had 2 catastrophic floods this year in the Una River in the north of Bosnia, when they had not had a catastrophic flood in 10 years, right? The average is on every 10 years, and now they've had 2 of them concentrated in one single year. So they're not prepared. And I think that that's the new normal that we're facing. The several human-related crises, but particularly climate change crisis is one that we have to keep an important eye on. And for the water sector, this is the crisis exacerbate the challenges and the pressures that you're facing, including the pressures to maintain a high level of service, the pressures with the rising energy prices, the aging workforce, and the imperatives for improved performance that you're facing in your day-to-day. So for a prosperous water sector, the Danube countries need to coordinate, need to work together and collaborate. And so that you can continue to adopt innovative approaches. And this is one of the venues where you can exchange information, leverage digital technologies, and also integrate renewable energy. And this in the context of aligning with the EU Green Deal objectives, which I think we all have to keep in mind that are a driver, but also a catalyst of sustainable water management. We at the World Bank take a lot of pride on the water agenda and the support that we give to the water sector, and in collaboration with our partners and also with our client countries. In addition to the Danube Water Program that has 16 countries, we have loans supporting 5 sectors in the Western Balkans. I oversee Western Balkans, and with more than 320 million in lending. We have the Sava-Drina integrated river corridor project, which works with several of the countries. It's regional. We also have water sector modernization projects in Bosnia and in Albania. And for the 23% people coming from Kosovo, yes, we are also working with you, Water Canal, and also the Flows project. We also have projects in other parts of Europe, in Moldova and in the Ukraine, and with EU, specifically with EU countries, we have a quite abundant support, providing advisory services and technical assistance that not only we support the EU countries, but also we can help inform the work that we're doing with all of you. The areas that we work on are mostly with the EU are flood and river basin management, and also investment planning to reduce water losses and adapt to climate change. So also, I'm excited for this conference because you will be having an announcement, which is that we have a new Center of Excellence coming, hosted by the World Bank in partnership with SECO, with the Swiss Corporation. This will be announced, and which will work in close coordination with the Danube Water Program and other donor-supported activities. All these activities will help provide a platform to effectively navigate this evolving landscape that we've been talking about. And we were talking about birthdays. I know that you can have one cake, but if you can, you should have another cake, because we have the 75th anniversary of the partnership between the World Bank and the government of Austria. Today is this year is a big year for us and working with Austria. I want to also reiterate our appreciation to the Ministry of Finance for the support to the Danube Water Program. We're in the fourth generation, the fourth phase, and we've seen how this has been instrumental in promoting sustainable water management practices in the region, fostering knowledge exchange and facilitating cooperation among stakeholders. It's been 4 years without a meeting. It's really painful. I think all sectors are facing the same challenges, and I hope that you enjoy this get together. I strongly recommend the evening activity tomorrow. I've had the opportunity to take the Danube cruise before, and it's a beautiful experience. In addition, obviously, to the conversation you're going to have with the colleagues. So go for it. I hope there's good music as well. I think the team is creating a Spotify list tailored to the Danube Water Conference. And finally, I was also delighted to learn that this joint journey of cooperation that you are having and that we are having together is internationally recognized beyond our group. And it was, for example, mentioned in the UN Water Conference in New York recently as well. There was, if you don't know, a recent visit from experts from Central Asia region to Vienna and to the Danube Water Program. So I wish you a successful and fruitful conference, and that you take advantage of the exchange, the insights, and the innovation that we can share. And let's navigate these changing waters together and have a sustainable water sector for the Danube region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ramon, for sharing your hands-on experience also from the region, which you traveled a lot, also understand, and also for some advice also for the social agenda in the frame of the conference. That's well recognized. Okay, coming to our next welcome speaker, whom I don't think I have to introduce. I will still do it, Walter. It's Mr. Walter Kling, who provides a brief welcome on behalf of our Danube Water Program partner organization, IAWD. Walter is the president of IAWD and has worked for the city of Vienna Waterworks, until his recent retirement in early 2023. Walter held a position as deputy managing director of Vienna Waterworks, serves as IAWD Secretary General since 1993 already, so since the very beginning, and currently also as IAWD president since 2017. So the IAWD person, I would say. Walter, please.
Well, thank you, Raymond. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, it's great to have you here again. So I really like to celebrate this. And there is actually 3 numbers I want to celebrate. First is the last 2 years. We missed one conference, which we planned to have here in Vienna. And we saw last year in Albania, when we had the first forum after the pandemic, really how important it is to meet face to face, to interact, to get in contact with each other. Then we can run virtual conferences, then we can discuss on the screen as well. But it makes events like this necessary to form a sector representation, which shows you as participants as the core group of this group representing the water sector. The other 2 numbers for me is important is the 30 years. 30 years seems to be quick. So 1993 is just a couple of years ago. And let me just reflect what had happened. In 1993, political situation was different. Iron Curtain raised. We faced a complete new Europe, and there was the task from politicians said, let's do a cooperation in various fields of infrastructure within this area of former communist countries, and we created the Danube Corporation, which is a much nicer way to name this area. In the 90s, we were trying to help countries, including Austria itself in 95, to join the European Union. The European Union extended their responsibility to take care of the water management development in this area. After the millennium, we had 10 years where the target was to have a world conference in 2008 in Vienna. Just please recall that this was the time where 5,000 delegates from around the world came to Vienna to recognize this is really interesting to see the Danube region, to see what's happening in this water sector here with this huge number of different countries, different languages, different cultural background to form a water sector which is interesting. And this created the interest of our partners, the World Bank and the Finance Ministry, to see that this need to be supported. And after 2 years of developing the Danube water program, we were able to establish this for the last 10 years. So this was our main task for the last 10 years. And with a flip, 30 years are gone. But I just want to congratulate the team again, our partners. I want to thank the ministry as well as the World Bank to help us create this gathering of the water sector. And I'm looking forward to the next 30 years to join you on various events. Thank you and have a nice conference in Vienna.
Yeah, thank you to all the speakers. Also, thank you now to our last speaker, Walter. You don't want to hear it, but you're basically one of the dinosaurs of IWD. So I don't want to think about in 30 years' time. Now, it's time for you to do something. We have talked quite a bit already. Now it's time to participate here. First thing you need to do is you have to connect to the internet. If you're not lucky enough to be in the EU to use mobile internet, you can also use the Wi-Fi here. The username is Besucher. There's no password required. And then in the next step, please either scan the code or go to polef.com and type 2023 DWC 515. So, okay, you're starting to get there. So we have a couple of questions, or we have one question here. What do you look forward to the most at the conference? The great program, the drinks at the welcome reception, the birthday cake at the conference dinner, the keynote of Gustavo, of course, or just meeting friends? I have to make my choice, actually. I see it's working. I see you can do the job. I'm a bit disappointed that you're not looking forward to the drinks, because I do. But Raymond, over to you.
Thanks. I think this is still moving, and that's in any case only a rolling outcome, I would say, because when we move on, and we had a question whether you look forward to the keynote, we are quite sure that if we would do this investigation assessment again after the keynote, the result would look, even more different, I would say. So it's time for the keynote now, and we are really pleased to have our colleague from the World Bank, Mr. Gustavo Saltiel, with us, who came all the long way from Washington, DC to join us here in Vienna today at the Danube Water Conference. Gustavo is the global lead for water supply and sanitation of the Water Global Practice at the World Bank, based in Washington, DC. As such, Gustavo coordinates global knowledge activities and operational support to World Bank teams across regions. He also oversees global work on water and sanitation utilities, policies, institutions and regulations, circular economy, water secure cities, and citywide inclusive sanitation. So quite a broad range of activities within the water supply and sanitation sector. Gustavo joined the World Bank in 2003, according to information I have. Raises the question whether we have another birthday, another anniversary to celebrate here this year and today. And he will share his extensive experience with today's keynote with the title, How to Address the Water Sector's Challenges in a Time of Multiple Crises. Gustavo, please join us.
Thank you, Raymond, Katia, Walter, Verena for the introductions. Good afternoon, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be here. And it's also great to be celebrating so many birthdays, including mine. I will be celebrating soon 20 years in the World Bank, but there are so many celebrations. So I think my presentation is on the screen. I would like to start by again thanking the government of Austria, the Ministry of Finance, also the Ministry of, let me see if I get this right, Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Water Resources. I'm missing something, I think, but regions, yes. Thanking the government of Austria, IAWD, for the invitation to speak and participate in the conference. So let me see if I can get the clicker. My presentation is again on challenges, which is the main theme of the conference, how to address the water sector challenges in times of multiple crises. So let me start by something that we all are aware of, which is that the world is not on track to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 6. Globally, 2 billion people do not have access to safe water supply services. Almost 4 billion do not have access to safely managed sanitation, most of them in Africa. The percentage of the population in Africa that has access to safe water supply is only 30%. On average, and of course this is an average, but it shows the magnitude of the challenge, utilities in developing countries lose 50% of the water they produce, the non-revenue water. Services in many places in the developing world are intermittent, on and off, and most of the utilities in developing countries do not manage to cover the operation and maintenance costs, let alone investments. So these are huge challenges in itself, and highlighting again that the world is not on track for Sustainable Development Goal 6. A brief reference to the Danube region, the challenges are different here. The region has made very good progress in terms of access to water supply. Perhaps sanitation or wastewater, access to sewerage or wastewater services is lagging behind. On average, 60% of the population has access to sewerage services in the Danube region. But I would say the most striking figure in the region is the limited access to wastewater treatment, or the limited amount of wastewater treatment services in the region. Of course, the EU countries have higher levels, in many cases almost 100%, like the case of Austria, but there are countries where treatment of wastewaters is almost nil. So this is a very important challenge, wastewater collection and wastewater treatment in the region. And I wanted to highlight that, and I will come back to this later on. So how do we define in the World Bank, or try to define in one slide, I know it's a complicated slide, the challenges that urban water and wastewater, or urban water and sanitation services face. First, the market failure. This is a natural monopoly. Water supply and sanitation services is a natural monopoly with very high fixed costs and very long-lived assets. Second, and this is very important, not always recognized in the public services literature, that the sector, the water supply and sanitation sector, has a significant environmental footprint. First of all, because of the resources it needs, water resources, but also because of the important public health and environmental implications of lack of sanitation or lack of wastewater treatment. So this is a group of challenges associated to the public service or monopolistic nature of the water supply and wastewater services. The second is what we call the government failure. The systems that governments put in place to address service delivery and this includes countries in the Danube region as well, are far from being effective. Weak financial and operational capacity of enterprises, of utilities, that's one. Poor intergovernmental coordination. And why do we highlight intergovernmental coordination? Because water supply and wastewater services are in general local services. But you also have national governments that are in charge of policy setting and financing, and the coordination between those two, in many cases, 3 levels of government, when there are regions in the middle, are not effective. Ineffective regulatory and pricing systems. Price does not always reflect the true cost of water. When there are subsidies, they are not properly targeted, and limited oversight and performance reporting. So this is the second set of challenges in terms of the sector organization. And then we have what we call the utilities slippery slope, or the vicious cycle of poor quality services, low willingness to pay, low revenues collected by the utilities, and constant service deterioration. This is a cycle that we see around the world and needs to be reverted. So these are the group of challenges associated to service delivery, government, market, and utilities. I'm sure in the Danube region, as in many parts of the world, there have been waves of reforms. In the 50s and 60s, there was the traditional public administration reforms, hierarchical professionalization of services, trying to create SOEs, state-owned enterprises. And that was an initial wave that was applied in many countries around the world. The second one, more in the 80s and 90s, included markets creation, private sector participation, decentralization, etc. So that was the second wave of reforms. And more recently focused on transparency, on governance, on accountability, and achievement of results. And why did I want to highlight this? Because today, what we see around the world is that all these different waves of reforms are reflected in sectors, industry, or sector structures that are not effective, both in terms of the organization, national, subnational, what we call decentralization, but also the roles of the service providers, be it regional, local, or national, the roles of the regulators, the roles of the asset holding, the way the government programs are structured in terms of financing, in terms of subsidies, and private sector participation. What you have in many countries is an overlap of legacy of different reforms that were not completed, and you have overlapping roles of institutions and policies. And this affects the effectiveness of service delivery in the water sector. Now, this was mentioned before by all the speakers that preceded me, the challenges that the region, the Danube region, but the world are facing as well. We know about the droughts, the floods affecting Europe in particular. We see now in the south of Europe, droughts sweeping across Portugal, Spain, south of France, places that had not seen this level of droughts before. So we have a series of challenges associated to water resources, but also in terms of urban services. The world is urbanizing. Perhaps this is not a significant challenge in this region, but the world is urbanizing. By 2050, 70% of the world population will be urban, and that puts a lot of stress on urban services. But also by 2050, GDP in cities, the gross domestic product, is expected to grow by 3 times, threefold. So the additional economic activity and growth will create additional pressure on the water resources. As a result of all these forces, climate change, population growth, economic growth, water demand is expected to grow by 50 or 60% by 2050. So water demand is growing significantly, and water availability is decreasing. Huge challenge. On top of the institutional challenges that I mentioned before. So we try to summarize all these challenges around a global challenge, which is the investment needs that the world needs to undertake to achieve sustainable development goal. Number 6, it has been estimated that total investments globally will need to increase between 4 and 6 times current investment levels to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 6. Can you imagine the size of the challenge? With the current crisis, the war and energy prices and fiscal crisis and labor crisis, to increase resources from governments for the water sector is very difficult to think of, increasing this magnitude of resources. On the right, you will see that 40% figure, because 40% of the resources to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 6 should go to urban wastewater services. And this is why I wanted to relate with the challenges in the Danube Basin, because the main challenge here is wastewater management. Globally, almost half of the resources needed to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 6 will need to go to cities for sanitation or wastewater management. Huge challenge, which means that we cannot continue with business as usual. We cannot continue doing the things the same way we are doing today. The World Bank has a proposition to address these challenges mainly at the urban level. And the reason why we're focusing on urban is because the world is urbanizing along three main dimensions. One is improving the enabling environment, the governance environment, what we call policies, institutions, and regulation. Second, utilities that provide inclusive, resilient, sustainable, and innovative services. These along the lines of an initiative that we call the Utilities of the Future, that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. If not, you will become familiar tomorrow when Camilo presents our Center of Excellence for Utilities of the Future. That's the second dimension of the strategy of the World Bank to address these challenges. And the third is an integrated approach to water management in cities, resilient and circular. So I will talk a little bit about each one of these now. On the policies, institutions, and regulation, the World Bank has developed a simple framework that is reflected in a series of reports that looks at the enabling environment, the political economy at the national level. What are the enabling conditions for sector reforms at the policy, institutional, and the regulatory level? And those reforms that many countries undertake, as I mentioned before, that are motivated in many cases by broader changes at the policy level. Countries decide to decentralize, but not only water, decentralize different types of services, or countries decide to bring more private sector participation. That creates the enabling environment for improving service delivery. We talk about the feedback loop because what happens is that not always the combination of policies, institutions, and regulation results in improved services. So in theory, what should happen is that the performance of the water sector reinforces the reforms that national governments need to undertake. We have developed this framework and we are applying it around the world, looking at the three dimensions of policies, institutions, and regulation in a coordinated manner. In the past, many organizations, including the World Bank, used to focus on one or two of those dimensions, either regulatory reforms, and we supported the creation of regulatory agencies without necessarily looking at the financing policies or the institutional architecture or the capacity. Today, we look and have this framework to assess these three dimensions in a coordinated manner. But this is not only the World Bank. A recent survey carried out among policymakers around in 100 countries shows that policymakers recognize that institutional challenges are the main challenges that the water sector faces. It's not infrastructure, it's not financing. This is recognized by policymakers around the world. Our main challenges are the institutions, is the enabling environment and the policies and the incentives. This is the framework developed by the World Bank recently that I mentioned before. The three key messages of our framework are our recent report is the following. One, PIR, policies, institutions, and regulation, is a precondition for solving some of the chronic challenges. Without addressing the policy, institutional, and regulatory fundamentals, even if you work intensively with utilities, the results will be suboptimal because you're not creating the incentives and the enabling environment for a sustained improvement of the services. We need a rigorous understanding of the root causes of the problems in the sector. That's the second And the third, and this is very important, including for international organizations like the World Bank, is that reforms do take time. And they require an important degree of learning. In the past, we used to think and assume that governments pass a new law, new legislation, a new decree, and reforms will happen overnight. And that's not necessarily the case. And this is about regulation, and I will come back to this, but I wanted to show you the example of Colombia, because it's a very interesting history of sector reforms over more than 25 years. Colombia started in the mid-90s with improved consolidation of service delivery and gradually increased the level of ambition of the sector reforms by creating a very robust regulatory agency. CRA is the name of that agency, but creating corporatized municipal utilities, by creating incentives for financing, by moving towards results and performance monitoring. And more recently, Colombia is looking at integrating the emerging challenges of water scarcity, technological innovation, and climate change into the regulatory models. So this is an example that shows us the importance of gradually improving the regulatory systems and the reforms. It didn't happen overnight. It took 25 years, and the result is a very robust water sector in the country. Second example, from Africa, Burkina Faso is a country that undertook a wave of different reforms starting in the mid-2000s with decentralization, followed by the introduction of public-private partnerships in 2007, and then the corporatization of the main utility. The World Bank has been involved supporting Burkina Faso for more than 15 to 20 years in this wave of reforms, addressing the different constraints at the policy, institutional, and regulatory level. But the reason why I wanted to mention and to bring this case is because it's a fragile context. It's very different from the context you have in the Danube region, but still it is possible to have sector reforms that deliver universal access to water supply and sanitation services. The graph on the right shows the progress in access, but also important cost recovery that has been achieved in Burkina Faso, a very poor country in Africa. And the third example I wanted to show is another basin, is the Ganga Basin in India, a basin very different to the Danube. But the reason why I wanted to bring this example as well is the leadership of a federal government, in the case of India, in establishing a program for wastewater treatment that incorporates private sector participation. As you may see in the slide, the program was launched in 2015, so it has 8 years of implementation. The World Bank and the International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank, have been supporting the Ganga program for these 8 years. And now it has a very robust system of private sector participation in wastewater treatment, including the model called BOT, Build, Operate, and Transfer, that in the case of India is called the hybrid annuity model, with 12 wastewater treatment plants financed, built, and operated by the private sector. It's an interesting program, an interesting example of a country that has totally different enabling environment and conditions than many countries in the Danube region, and still managed to have a robust program to clean up the Ganga Basin with private sector participation. So these are 3 cases that show the importance of government interventions in a sustained manner to achieve important sector reforms. The second line of work is the utilities that provide inclusive, resilient, sustainable, and innovative services. We have, as I mentioned before, launched a program about 4 years ago that we call the Utilities of the Future. A utility of the future is defined as a future-focused utility which provides reliable, safe, inclusive, transparent, and responsive water supply and sanitation services through best fit practices that allow to operate in an efficient, resilient, innovative, and sustainable manner. It's a long definition. tomorrow, I think you will hear much more about the utilities of the future, and you may have heard before. I also know that in the Danube region, in the Danube program, you have programs supporting utilities and utility turnaround that have been in place for many years. So this is the approach we are following. We developed this framework and this tool to turn around utilities and to help them become the utility of the future. So this is the second line of work. And here is something interesting I wanted to share with you. From our analysis of around 700 utilities around the world, from our IBNet database of utilities, we found that currently, I mean, at the time we did the analysis a few years ago, only 15% of the utilities in that sample of 700 utilities were viable. What is a viable utility? In this case, we defined as that utility that has 120% coverage of the O&M cost of the OPEX. So if you have 20% excess in your revenues over your expenditures, you are considered viable. That's an arbitrary definition. But what's interesting is that at the time of the initial analysis, only 15% of the utilities in that sample were viable. By increasing the collection rate, the commercial efficiency by 10%, the collection rate, taking the collection rate to 100%, it would double the number of utilities that would be viable, almost to 30%. So utilities that are inefficient commercially, by increasing commercial efficiency, 30% of the sample would become viable without any tariff increase yet. Then by reducing the non-labor costs, that is mainly energy and chemicals, by 15%, it would increase to 41% the number of viable utilities. Reducing non-revenue water to 25% would increase 65% the number of utilities that are viable. And I haven't talked yet about tariff increases. So all this is about efficiency. And then by increasing 10% the revenues, and there are different ways of increasing revenues, mainly tariff increases, you would have about 80% of the sample that would be viable. So this means that utilities can become efficient and can recover costs without huge tariff increases. This is from a sample of 700 utilities in our database IBNet. So using tools like the utilities of the future and other similar tools is a very powerful tool to improve the efficiency and make utilities viable. And this is transforming the vicious cycle that I mentioned before from poor service delivery, poor quality, low revenues, and that vicious circle that the users are not willing to pay, changing it into a virtuous cycle whereby the utility provides better services, is more efficient, users are satisfied, the staff of the utility is motivated, and you transform that utility into a utility of the future, a sustainable utility. So it is possible to revert the performance of the utilities. Of course, please bear with me that this is a global situation. And I know that many of you here in the Danube region have overpassed this situation. Many of you are efficient utilities. This applies as an average to utilities in the different regions in Latin America, in Africa, and in Asia. It may not be the case of all the countries here in the Danube region, but perhaps it is the case of a few countries. So a few examples, and I think I'm running out of time, so I will be quick. This is, and I'm trying to show examples from different regions. This is a case of Himachal Pradesh in India, a city called Shimla, where the World Bank have supported through different instruments, different types of lending instruments, the improvement of the efficiency of that utility and the performance of that utility, moving towards results-based financing, using results-based financing, an instrument that we call Program for Results. The results achievement and the performance improvement of the utility that you can see on the right has been impressive. In Uruguay, working more than 20 years with a national utility called OCE of Uruguay, focusing on non-revenue water, on commercial efficiency improvement, the utility has managed recently to go to the markets and to obtain financing with issuing a bond, the utility issued a bond itself, went to the markets and got financing at very low rates, totally independently from the government and totally independent from IFIs. So the message here is also that by improving performance in a sustainable manner, utilities can become credit worthy, which is the case of this utility in Uruguay, and go to the markets and obtain the financing they need for the capital expenditure programs. The third line of work is on the integrated, circular, and resilient management of water at the city level. We are adopting the circular economy model for management of water resources at the city level. The idea of moving away from the linear model of taking, using, and disposing to a circular model whereby you recover resources, mainly from wastewater. And when we talk about recovering resources, it's recovering water, yes, wastewater reuse, but also recovering nutrients as fertilizers and energy from wastewater treatment plants. So we are adopting this integrated circular model for water and wastewater management at the urban level. This has obvious effects on public health and mitigation, climate mitigation and adaptation. Now, despite of the ongoing water crisis, including here in Europe, and I will focus I will share some numbers from Europe. Wastewater reuse and circular economy practices in Europe for water and wastewater systems are still limited. You have an average in the EU of 2.4% of wastewater that is reused. In the United States, it's a little better, but still very low, 6.6%. There are some countries like Cyprus, that is an outlier, Spain, 15%, Greece, Italy, Portugal with low figures as well. So reuse is a huge opportunity, and there is a new wastewater reuse directive issued by the EU that promotes the reuse of wastewater. So there are huge opportunities to address the scarcity issues, challenges, and water crisis through increasing the percentage of reuse of wastewaters. So a few examples on circular economy approaches and wastewater reuse. In the case of Durban in South Africa, the city of Durban developed a PPP, a private sector, private-public partnership with a private company to treat the wastewater because it was a very complex treatment system, and to sell the treated wastewater to two industries. One, it was a paper mill, and the other one was an oil processing industry. By selling the treated wastewater to the industries freed up the fresh water that they were using, and that provided additional water resources for the population of Durban. But also part of the treated wastewater was used to recharge the aquifer. So this PPP was a win-win situation for the city first, because it generated revenues through selling the treated wastewater to the industry to cover the cost of the wastewater treatment plant, but also to have more water resources for population that were not originally served by the utility of Durban. The second case is here in Europe, is in Barcelona, in Spain. It's a similar case whereby the Catalonian Water Agency that treats the wastewater sells treated wastewater to the farmers, and doing that also frees up water for the city of Barcelona and other cities in the region. So this is the second example, a similar approach. And the third one is in Mexico City, one of the largest wastewater treatment plants in the world. It's a wastewater treatment plant for about 20 million people in the city of Mexico that provides treated wastewater to farmers in a different state. But those farmers, before using this treated wastewater, were using water from aquifers. Aquifers that currently are used to supply rural communities in the same areas where the farmers are based, but also for Mexico City, that is a city that is suffering water scarcity. So by reusing the wastewater from this huge wastewater treatment plant for irrigation, it frees up fresh water for serving more people that didn't have access to the services. So circular economy approaches, the three examples I have mentioned, create the opportunity of freeing up water resources, scarce water resources for high value uses of water, be it for industrial purposes, high value crops, or for cities, and using treated wastewater for uses that do not require the same level of quality. So concluding, first of all, I wanted to highlight again the importance of building strong and credit-worthy utilities, and I gave a couple of examples. Sector reforms along two lines. One is on the enabling environment, the policy, institutional, and regulatory front, creating incentives for service delivery. Second, improving the performance of the utilities using a model like the utilities of the future or a similar one. And I showed the example of how different actions at the utility level, be it improving the commercial efficiency, reducing the non-labor cost, and reducing the non-revenue water, increases the revenues and increases the efficiency. So enabling environment, improving the performance of the utilities generates the conditions for creating credit-worthy utilities that can go to the markets, like the case of the utility of Uruguay, and borrow. Why is this so important? Why am I highlighting this? Because as I showed in one of my first slides, the public resources available in countries and in multilateral organizations to achieve SDG 6 are not enough. I mentioned that it has been estimated that current investment levels will need to increase by 4 to 5 or 6 times. It's impossible. There is no money available from the public purses to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 6. So utilities need to be able to leverage private financing, and there is an opportunity, and there is a private sector willing to come to bring resources to utilities. So this is one of the conclusions and the takeaway messages I wanted to share with you. Creating the conditions for performance improving, moving utilities towards creditworthiness. The second is what we have learned from sector reforms. I have mentioned before that sector reform processes are political and require a deep understanding of the political economy and context in each one of the countries, the importance of strengthening the corporate governance. Financial sustainability objectives need to be prioritized, the importance of the customers and the voice of the customers. And the last one that I want to highlight, and I mentioned before, is that reforms are not a one shot. It's not an event, it's not a single event, it's not also a linear process. It takes time. Some of the examples I showed, like the cases of Burkina Faso, India, and Colombia, demonstrate that countries to achieve services that move towards a universal service and are efficient need time. And so we need to take that into account when undertaking sector reforms. And finally, the importance of circular economy approaches for water resources management at the urban level in particular, because recovery of resources, recovery of water, recovery of energy is important in this context, in particular of water scarcity, but also very important for the climate change mitigation and adaptation agenda. And I think this was my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gustavo, for walking us through this presentation. I have to admit at the beginning I was a little bit depressed because of this huge list of challenges that we're facing. So thanks also for providing some inspiring solutions and case studies. There's a lot to digest now. So Raimund and myself, we have asked ourselves, should we walk you through this digestion process? And we said, no. I mean, we walked you up till here. We have done our job. We need to do the closing as well. So enough to do for us. And that's why we have invited another person to chair this panel discussion now, which is Monica Weber-Farr. So please, Monica, join us here. Those of you in our, please come up. Those of you in our Danube Water Program family who have joined the conference in 2019 and also the forum last year, you already know her. I mean, her biography is like this, so I will just highlight a few key elements. She's a senior advisor of the World Bank. She has been the CEO of the Global Water Partnership. She has been the COO of Sustainable Energy for All, and she has 25 years of experience in the development, finance, and business advisory. In addition, she has a couple of PhDs, masters, and other diplomas. So now you know why we have invited her, because she's a lot smarter than we are. And Monica, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And this is another way of saying you're a dinosaur. Thank you very much. I have the great pleasure to now invite 3 other digestion helpers. And I think that's now the official title of this panel. If you join me in welcoming Vesna Muslic. Vesna is the president of Aquazan in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Please, Vesna, if you would join me here. Also, I would love to have Ilberine Balju here. Ilberine, where are you? Over there. So Ilberine is from Kosovo, and there she is the secretary of the Youth and Water Network. And finally, Christian Minelli. Christian, as he told me earlier, is an official, which I think is the Italian term for civil servant, with the regulatory authority in Italy for energy and network services. And also he is with VAREC, which is, I think many of you know, I just need to link off my 19-year-old son who's just calling me. The VAREC, who works on capacity building and coordination mainly between European authorities for water agencies. So we get to digest, but we don't only want to digest. I also would like to invite you to pull out your phones for a moment of exercise. Before we even get started debating on whether we agree with Gustavo or not, we want to hear what you think. So connect to the internet and, oh, he wants his phone. You don't have an opinion about yourself. Yeah, he wants to have an opinion about himself. Okay, so you have to say that you disagree. So you remember how this worked? Link into that little code or type what they have here, polef.com 2023 DWC FERC 15 on your tablet and smartphone. And then comes the first question to you, which hopefully should appear in a moment. And really, we want to know what your personal view is on prioritizing the multiple crises that, oh, I get to click and then it comes up. Oh, we have this one first. One back, this one forward, right? So how would you prioritize addressing the multiple crises just mentioned? And prioritizing means you get to actually move these little things up and down, right? You figure that out? So my husband always says his fingers are too big for the little devices. But, you know, it's time we women have an advantage somewhere. So economic crisis still tops everything, even though I have to say, when I was just looking at what Gustavo mentioned as one of the biggest challenges in the region, the untreated wastewater and the relatively low reuse of water, I was kind of wishing I was living in Cyprus, right? They kind of figured that one out. So climate change still stays on number one. Look at that, human resources became number 2. And the energy crisis, very different to when we were talking in Albania. Was it just a year ago when energy was absolutely number 1? Are you all done? How many do we have? Can somebody tell me how many votes we have in? No. There's a way to see that. I think they're going to keep it secret. So let's go to the next. Oops, there you go. Oh my God. Some human resource people have just voted themselves up. So we will take a look at that here as a group, whether you agree with that prioritization or where you would be in that in just a moment. And then we would like to hear from you. Now it's time to use your fingers even more. Do you see any other trends than the ones that we have just put up? We had only given you 5 different trends to bring up, and you may see something very specific. Okay, number 1, I guess that's climate change. Lack of data, look at that. We had that lack of human capacities, but it's good that it's coming back. Education kind of going in the same direction. And here comes that big ugly P word, politics, right? Politics and instability, brain drain, institutions, yeah. So you've seen, I mean, that's always fascinating when you hear somebody like Gustavo speak about kind of the very big picture, then the work on policy institutions and regulatory environments all of a sudden kind of takes another perspective. When you look over at 25 years of work in India or so, you can see how things work. Accuracy of data and political awareness. So as you keep sending in new pollutants, look at that. Yeah. Well, I'm sure you all have an opinion on those ones, specifically, microplastics, but also many other things that are coming in there right now. The digitalization theme is staying with us, which I think is something that the Danube Water Program is looking at with you in a more systematic way. And there is the motivation word, which is one of the things that I think we should also take a look at as we're digesting either now or over drinks, which is, and Kati said that it looks so exhausting, just looking at that list of things that we all need to take care of, where to start and how to motivate ourselves to actually not getting too tired, but figuring out where to get started. Corruption, geopolitical overarching situation and deteriorating infrastructure. See, great list of major crises and things to look at for the Danube Water Program. But as we're going into this, I'm just going to switch you guys off and move to Vesna here. Vesna, your take on the crisis that we have heard from Gustavo. Would you have prioritized the same way?
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. When it comes to prioritization, in my view, priority should be given to human resources and developing capacities of human resources. Only people with knowledge, people with skills, people with competencies can make this sector perform well, both in terms of operational performance and technical performance. The sector does need investments, does need funds, but only people who have capacities can make these investments sustainable, can make the most out of available resources, out of available assets, and can make these investments sustainable in a long run. Otherwise, if you do not have capacitated people, if you do not have capacities, then these investments are waste of money. And when I say, if I just may add, when I say developing capacities of human resources, I mean both of those who are working directly in the sector, but also developing capacities of decision makers. So those who are making ultimate decisions for the sector, national governments, but mostly important to local governments, because as mentioned, in our areas, local governments mainly have primary responsibility for providing water services. And then instead of fulfilling their roles and obligations, they're basically just establishing water utility and then completely neglecting it and letting water utility to struggle with its own problems, unless there is a need for a political appointment or for political recruitment. And we all know that water utility needs full support from local governments so that they can operate fully. So priority number one, in my view, is developing capacities of human resources, both those working in the sector, but also decision makers.
Thank you. And if you permit me, I'm going to slightly modify that question. I'm going to Christian. If Vesna says human resources capacity at the local level, would you think this is training? Would you think, what is this? Where would you kind of intervene from a regulatory agency perspective? set priorities. Oh, we need another mic. I think there's one. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks you first of all for being invited here. It's a pleasure being here. Very nice setting. And now, if you allow me, Monica, I'd like to make a little step back, and I totally agree with the first, let's say, top priority is how to address to the emerging crises. And I really thank Gustavo for the brilliant and very exhaustive and clear messages that we will use definitely as World Bank messages to pass this concept that we don't have too much time, and prevention is really less costly than coming later on. And prevention is absolutely crucial, and it's a matter, first of all, of investment, capacity to plan, capacity to manage, and you correctly pinpointed that institutions, policies, and regulations, integrations of these three aspects is crucial for that. And that happens at any level, from the national to the regional and the local in the governance at national level. But also, and here I come to your question, Monica, thanks. Also at local level, local municipality, especially when they are publicly owned, or even now that I heard in certain areas where governments are trying to, to get ownership, part of the ownership of these local management and assets. It's very much important to generate bridges between institutions and the operators. How you do that? Everybody has his own formulas. From the regulatory perspective, regulation actually is all about knowledge of the sector and reducing the difference, the asymmetries of information. You economists, you know what they are, between institutions and the industry. And a regulator, where it exists, not everywhere, but where it exists and it is empowered to do so, has exactly this role. And one of the role is the empowerment of civil society to understand what is at stake for them, the health, their health, the sanitation, the environment, and also to empower the utilities to understand how to keep their financial balance, to be environmentally sustainable, how to plan their investments in such a way that they can manage correctly the investment. I mean, where they exist, they try to drive and to correct. And one of the tools that they use is training. Not training, but maybe it's the wrong word, but campaigning or explaining the role, the rules that are out there, what is at stake, how to manage certain crises at local level, especially in situations where you have little municipalities that are not able to address these big challenges. So you need someone out there that is able at least to try to explain and to give you the competence or to help you strengthen those competencies. So I totally agree with you that, human resources as a consequence of that practically are one of the tools that you can use to, to empower utilities. Thanks.
Thank you. And this gets me immediately to Ilberine, if I may. Of course, coming from to the question of human resources from a youth perspective is kind of a different one than when you're looking at from managing a utility. You're kind of seeing different career paths, you're seeing options or not existing options. Where would you see the biggest crisis out there? Would you have prioritized it the same way? And would you have also said, invest in human resources at the local level, make sure the regulators are activist, as Christian has said, making sure that the information asymmetries are removed in a efficient and effective manner? Would that have been your vote also?
Well, first, hello to everyone. It's nice to be here. Yeah, I totally agree with Vesna in this point, especially since lately we see a trend of young people kind of being demotivated for this sector. Unfortunately, maybe it's only in the Balkans because the problems change for different regions. It's not the same for every region, but we see this trend. So it's I really think that first, a motivation of young people must come, training them, just like Vesna said, not only for utilities, but also for governing and to bringing them closer to decision making. Just training them for the future, because we young people are the future of this sector. We will deal with the future, with the challenges that were mentioned until now. So we are the ones that will bring innovation to this sector. So I think that bigger motivation to young people is also essential at this point.
Thank you. And so the motivation topic that I think a couple of people have also brought up, perhaps looked at in the context of fuel brain drain, is really an important one. And now with my next series of questions, if you permit me, I will involve Gustavo. Now that we have kind of judged that you were maybe at the right direction, but I think here we would have wanted to hear a bit more on human resources, capacity, empowerment, and motivation. Have you seen an ingenious initiative, something special that a utility that you can mention or a regulatory body has done that, you know, in a 2-minute extra where you say that's something where we can actually get inspiration from, a turnaround situation, a moment of really addressing the human resource challenge that people have?
Okay, thank you, Monica, and I will come back to that. But first, if you allow me, a quick reaction to the comments from my colleagues in the panel. First of all, Ilberina, I think it's a very critical point. I mean, how we in the water sector, in the water industry, manage to bring young professionals to the utilities and the regulators. There is no interest in general. And you know, I'd like to perhaps to hear more from you, what ideas you can share, because we need the innovation, we need the different approaches and different views of the young generation with new ideas. But this is a very, very important point. And you know, I'd like to hear more on that. Human resources, by all means, Vesna, is a very important point that is, actually, I did not mention it explicitly in my presentation. It's one of the dimensions of the utilities of the future. I mean, addressing human resources constraints and change management. This is one of the key features of the utilities of the future. But yes, I mean, it's a super important constraint, because irrespectively of what utilities of the future or PIR systems or reforms you put in place, if you don't have the capacity there, nothing is going to happen. And second, nothing is going to be sustained because you create fantastic structures, but who is going to operate them? Who is going to run them over the long time? So this is a super important constraint. And Christian, thanks also for your points, in particular on regulation. And let me try to put your words in my mouth. And because you actually alluded to roles of the regulators that are not orthodox or classical. You mentioned the economic regulation, but also you talked about the regulator as an arbitrator, as somebody who has credibility in the sector, is a solid technical body that understands the sector, that understands operations and finances and economics of service delivery, but also environmental issues and climate change, and it's a trustable entity that can provide advice to decision makers, even if regulators are not necessarily the decision maker and do not have the power to make decisions in terms of tariffs, which is not always the case. You know, it's more seldom every day that the regulator will be allowed by the government to make tariff determinations. I mean, that was in the original days of what back in the 90s. Today is more seldom, but still, if countries can manage to have these solid bodies of technical expertise that remain with time, that are not affected by political changes, it's fantastic gain for the sector. So thanks a lot for making that reference, because many times when it comes to regulation, people tend to think about the economic regulation only. I mean, it's somebody who develops an economic model and equates investments and expenditures with revenues, and that's it. And it's much more than that. And thank you for making that reference. So in terms of examples.
One only.
One only.
Because we have another human resource problem here in the room.
I mean, so I think there is a risk of mentioning one of them. You know, the case, and I think it will be presented here tomorrow, I understand, the case of Portugal. It's a fantastic case, a fantastic story in Europe that shows, you know, how building institutional capacity, one, but second, human resources, in particular in the national utility, Aguas de Portugal is an excellent case.
Thank you. So stay tuned for tomorrow, the Portugal session. Vesna, your example of an ingenious intervention, an ingenious, inspiring turnaround, a utility that has actually invested, or a local municipality that had invested in human resources as well.
My example would be, I see here Director of Water Utility Gradishka and his colleagues. I think that 3 years ago he had a presentation about his shining
Can you just stand
example.
up so that we see you and can, during the drinks, come and bombard you with questions?
Yes.
Okay.
He had a great presentation 3 years ago, how he managed to turn around high non-revenue water levels in his water utility. But what actually happened there? There was what we call decision by management, by young management of the water utility, that something needs to be changed. And that's a step number 0, or first step, let's put it this way, commitment of the management of water utility that things need to be changed. And then engaging the entire water utility, but also support from local government that they had at the time, really made success story that with some, at first, limited interventions over a limited period of time, they really managed to significantly decrease non-revenue water levels from 59% to 39%. So this is a really shining example.
Thank you.
Things can be done.
Question. Now, an inspiring regulatory example.
We have to be nationalistic in this sense.
Oh my God, we love Italy. So,
but looking from where we stand in Italy, 10 years.
You want to use the microphone?
Oh yes, sorry. I was saying that using personally, starting from where we were standing 10 years ago, 2011, the water sector in Italy, what it was. And how difficult was it to attract investment? And we didn't have any external support, nor from donors, nor from the Italian government. You know the situation of our debt. It's incredible how the sector developed. And what is the sector right now? If you look at the top 10, top 50 utilities in Italy, you will see that they are a totally different thing than they were 10 years ago. They do totally different things in terms of education, in terms of management, in terms of innovation. They are totally different. They even have different lines of business right now. And this is possible, I believe, because in Italy, it has been used a very powerful and effective formula of dialogue between institutions at national, regional, and local level, where the regulator is just a bridge between the policymakers, the government, and the local level. With the right setup and the right competencies, it is possible to make huge steps forwards in terms of development. And you know better than me how much money and investment is needed to deliver the growth you are thinking of.
Thank you. And so I don't need to ask you to stand up because we all can see you. So during the drinks, we can approach you and make sure that you come and visit and tell our regulators how to do it. But now, Ilberine, from the youth perspective, have you seen an ingenious example, somebody who has actually addressed the human resource challenge, looked at what we can and must do to face these multiple crises through people?
Well, I haven't actually seen someone doing that. But I've seen some examples in Kosovo when there was given opportunity to young professionals, and it turned out really good. I have 2 examples in Kosovo. There are 2 wastewater treatment plants. They are managed by 2 young water professionals. It turned out very successful. Those 2 treatment plants.
Can I just ask, young means?
Sorry?
Young means, what does young mean?
Young water professionals.
Young, no, does it, if you say these 2 utilities, 35 and under, just for everybody to be fully.
Sorry, I couldn't understand it. So, I mean, it's for me, it's a simple example, but it's really good to see that when you give the opportunity to young people, when you motivate them, you can see the success in it, because there are a lot of talents out there. So you only have to motivate them and give the opportunity, and you can see the result then.
Thank you. And I think that's a really important point to be made, that we shouldn't just be talking about creating space for young people. We shouldn't just be lamenting about the brain drain, but we should actually, you know, turn this whole thing into action. And I mean, last week I was at the GWOPA conference in Bonn, and one of the most illuminating experiences for me was there was an entire team that had developed a beautiful set of recommendations, career plans, etc., what to do with young people. They had 5 people attending that session, right? So it's easy to speak about it, but when it even comes to giving an hour of your time to learn how to really do it, what other people think, that sometimes is not the time we're taking. Which gets me to the last question. And we had wanted to involve all of you in the debate, but given that I think the main human resource challenge we have here right now is that we're between you and drinks, I just wanted to invite the panel to give us all one recommendation of what we should focus on in these next 2 days. We have a rich program. We have a lot of opportunities to learn, to discuss, to exchange. What, in your view, what is your favorite session? What's the favorite activity? What, in your view, we should be doing? I think, Gustavo, you've already told us, Portugal. Is there another recommendation you could have?
No, I think listening to the colleagues in the panel, I think this issue of human resources or building capacity of institutions and building the human resources base is very relevant. Let's see what we can learn from the conference.
Vesna.
I think all topics are very relevant, very interesting. So definitely I cannot say that no favorite.
Oh my God.
No favorite. I mean, I think that they are good, but I would maybe just invite all of us to really engage in networking, because this is a great opportunity. We are all here. Let us talk to each other. Let us discuss good and bad practices that we have, learn from each other, because this is really the opportunity for us to build community of people working in this sector, caring for this sector, and wishing the best for this sector. That's it. But no favorite.
Thank you.
In
Christian,
terms of topics.
You had a favorite example earlier, Italy. Is there an Italian session that you want to recommend?
Absolutely. You're stunning in organizing everything, and I'm sorry I will miss it. I really would like to reschedule my flight, but they said it's impossible. So, I think that I agree with Vesna. The food program is incredibly interesting. And I also agree that the asset here is the brains and opinions that you bring together in a few days. So yes, interact and take the most advantage out of that to build something between now and the next Danube conference. This is critical in my view. So
thank you. Hilberine, your favorite session or your recommendation on what we should be doing in the next 2 days?
Well, for me also the program seems incredible. So I would recommend that, I mean, here you have a lot of Balkan countries. So all of them actually have this kind of the same problem. So, and maybe all of them solve them in different ways. So maybe just share this, what they did, and learn from each other, and just solve their problems, how their neighbors solved it.
Thank you. And in my experience with the water sector, what I so love is that we have so many engineers that you don't mind having different opinions. And because in the end, it's all data. And in the end, one can actually figure out why one agrees or disagrees. So the invitation from me personally would be look for disagreements and figure out where they come from. That's the best way to actually dig a little bit deeper into the experience of someone else. And then, of course, and I think many of you have pointed that out, data, compare each other, learn how to compare, benchmark, kind of that's where we want to go all together. And with that, my single logistical task that the team has given me is to make sure that you all know what is happening now, not this. We are supposed to all come together to the welcome reception. I think it's right outside. And I think it's courtesy of the team. So everybody is welcome. Let's go and network.